All right. Okay. Hi, and welcome to the San Lorenzo Valley Emergency Network General Meeting. Today is Tuesday, July 30th. We are hybrid today. We are in person at Mountain Community Resources in Felton and also online in Zoom. We have a really important subject to speak of tonight. It is on the subject of communication, and this is about broadband and what that means for us. So just as a note, last week, Tuesday, we did our first part of communications, another Sullivan general meeting, and spoke about emergency alerts that can come from the county to us and ways that we can have emergency communications back through the county. So we touched on a number of radio-based communication technologies. But tonight, what's really interesting and important is how do we all get connected, given that our valley has challenges, cell phone coverage and internet connection, access for everyone who should have access. And recently we learned about this federal program called BEAD, B-E-A-D. We'll talk about that this evening. And we're really happy to bring this evening some guests to help inform us about what is BEAD, the background for that program, what is happening in our county to help foster and promote the growth of what's called middle mile and last mile internet. And we want to know what's possible, what can possibly be brought to, it's not just our nation, state, county, but also San Lorenzo Valley, because that matters to us so much. So with that, we will be talking about the state of high-speed internet today in SLV, what our broadband goals are in Santa Cruz County, what do we mean by middle mile and last mile, and where does the money come from to actually pay for all of this? We're interested to learn about what are the potential coming benefits from this work in San Lorenzo Valley. We are going to talk about a CPUC process to evaluate a map of all of the organizations that are should be able to be served for internet. And we're going to talk about what's called the BEAD map challenge process and the time frame for that. And we will also have a little bit about what's called next generation emergency radio communications, because there's some technology happening in that realm. So we have with us this evening, and these folks will speak. We have Manny Garcia from Congressman Panetta's office. We have Maura Golde from the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, Tammy Weigel from the County of Santa Cruz IT Department. And we've got also David Witowski, also from Monterey Bay Economic Partnership. You may speak and answer some questions. So we've got some great guests with us today. Thank you for being here. What will happen is would like to invite everyone who's online to go ahead and mute if you're not speaking. And with that, you can put some questions in the chat as we go along, and we'll see if we may have to just go with our speakers and have a bunch of questions near the end of the call. So with that, Thank you so much for being here, and we'll get started.
Fantastic. All right, so yeah, let's have Manny Garcia. Welcome, Manny, from Congressman Panetta's office. Tell me a little bit about what Panetta has been doing in this area of broadband.
Certainly. So I wanted to share some remarks that the congressman actually asked me to share with you all today. So that's going to answer some of your questions, and I'm free to answer any questions afterwards. My name is Emmanuel Garcia, the District Director of Congressman Jimmy Panetta. Unfortunately, Congressman Panetta could not be with us this afternoon due to the legislative schedule. However, he wants me to be here to share an update of the federal work and state work that is going on to ensure broadband and cellular service throughout California's 19th Congressional District and here in the San Lorenzo Valley. One of the most important things that we have done is the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which is going to invest $42.5 billion nationwide and $1.8 billion in California to support projects and underserved areas. As the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act continues to be implemented, Representative Panetta is working closely with state and local partners to unite our community and prepares to strongly advocate for the reliable and reasonable broadband that we all deserve. This spring, Congressman Panetta hosted 3 roundtables in the 19th Congressional District about the need for additional broadband build out and to ensure that there are active engagement from our community in this process. Recently, the state of California and its Middle Mile Advisory Council released a new Middle Mile map, which was very concerning. These maps indicate where the state is planning to build the spine of broadband infrastructure. Due to budget cuts at the state level, this state agency decided to cut 2,542 miles from the map. This unfortunate decision can significantly impact plans to expand service throughout California, including right here in Santa Cruz County, in Felton, Boulder Creek, and their larger San Lorenzo Valley community. Currently, Representative Panetta strongly believes that this is unacceptable and that our community and the needs to work to implement fully the goals of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Congressman Panetta has already reached out to state representatives to engage on this issue, including the Office of Senator John Laird, Assemblymember Gail Pellerin, and Assemblymember Don Addis. Together, we must now pressure the California Public Utilities Commission and California Department of Technology to rethink the strategy and do right by our communities. This is a community-wide effort, and any outreach by you to our state representatives, as well as the State Public Utilities Commission and the Department of Technology would help. Representative Panetta appreciates all of your engagement on this issue. Our office looks forward to working with our state representatives and partnering with you all to ensure that the state of California appropriately uses federal investment that Representative Panetta helped secure so that everybody in California's 19th Congressional District can have reliable broadband. If you have any questions, you can reach out to our Santa Cruz office. The phone number is 831-429-1976.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel.
Yeah. Thank you, Tammy. Does that answer some of your questions? Is there something that you would like to dive deeper into?
Well, we will dive deeper into those topics as we move forward. We're going to, in fact, we will come back and we're going to talk about that recent legislative change. So hold those thoughts because we know that's been an important information coming to us really recently. So why don't I ask and introduce Tammy Weigel, the Chief Information Officer for Santa Cruz County, to join us. And she has a great presentation that is going to help explain from the implementation side of what Emmanuel just spoke about, the actual nuts and bolts of what happens when we have legislation that's trying to give us funding, what we expect to have come from that. So Tammy,
Okay.
welcome.
Thank you. So let me share my screen here.
Sure.
Okay. So I'm just going to go today basically to talk about broadband, BEAD, and the San Lorenzo Valley. So just a real quick review of the agenda here. I'll go over briefly the county strategic plan that you can find out on the county website. Some of the short and long-term goals that are coming out of that plan, grants and other funding. Briefly touch on some of the existing underway broadband projects in San Lorenzo Valley. I do want to touch, because I know this is a big issue for SLV, is the cellular status and some projects that are under permitting review right now in San Lorenzo Valley. I'll do a very brief overview and updates on BEAD and the challenge process, because Mara and David will be able to dive more into that. And then I've got a slide that I'll talk about the Regional Interoperable Radio Project that's underway. So just a real quick introduction for me. As Tammy said, I am the current CIO IT director for the County of Santa Cruz. I've been in this role for now almost 3 years. I have 25 years with the County of Santa Cruz, and those 25 years I've worked in IT, and I've worked in a variety of roles, including networking and telecommunications. I've got almost 40 years in the information technology field, and I was the sponsor and project lead for the county strategic broadband plan. And I'm a 35-year resident of Santa Cruz County. I currently live in Scotts Valley, and my family and I have been here since 2000. So to briefly talk about our strategic broadband plan, so there was a plan done back in 2015, but it was really focused on economic development. And with all of the federal and state level focus on accessible broadband and all the grants that were going to be coming up, we wanted to do an update to that 2015 plan. So we actually got a grant from the CPUC that was called the Local Area Technical Assistance Grant. And we engaged a consultant called CTC, Columbia Telecommunications Corp, to update the plan with goals of how we were going to be able to effective use of grant funding, to understand where the gaps were in Santa Cruz County, to create some mid and long-term plans for the broadband in the county, to create some short-term goals to increase broadband access for residents, businesses, and our anchor institutions, and then be able to identify potential broadband partners within our community and current assets and anchor institutions. And so we went through this process. We did map analysis based on the existing maps that were out there regarding broadband. We interviewed all the Board of Supervisors, including Bruce McPherson, regarding some of the issues that they were hearing from residents. We interviewed business associations, educational partners, including UCSC and Cabrillo, and all the County Office of Education and the library system. We also talked to city governments, as well as we did a survey out to residents. And I want to thank the Boulder Creek Business Association, because they did promote that survey and indicated people that they were going to get phone calls, and they were not spam calls. They were actual calls where we wanted to hear about your experience. So with all that data together, we built up these recommendations. So in 0 to 6 months, which is the time frame we're in right now, we started wanting to conduct financial and business assessment for the planned use of BEAD, which you'll hear more about later on, and including these partnerships, other grant opportunities that would be out there, and then also look at how we could use the existing fibers and fiber that in Santa Cruz County and any source of revenue. We continue to work both with MBEP and directly with a lot of our regional carriers to improve internet access. And basically, this is called the facilitation model, where we support their efforts. We try to guide them to where we see there was identifiable issues, especially in our rural and mountainous areas, which is San Lorenzo Valley. So, at the very least, we work to provide letters of support when they're going for grants. We've been, working, we identify grants, we've gone out to them and said, is this a grant you might be interested? For instance, we are currently looking at one with the Housing Authority about low-income housing broadband. And then we work very closely with the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership and then the California Emerging Technology Fund to tackle affordability issue as a region with both Monterey and San Benito County. And so until February of this year, there was a great program called ACP. It was accessible internet for low-income individuals. And so with that program unfortunately went away at the federal level. So we've been working with MARA and MBEP and CATF to actually assist our low-income residents to get affordable broadband by setting up a phone tree where they can call in and a person will work with them to find the best plan possible to keep their internet costs low. So our 2 to 5 years is we're looking at pursuing a cost-effective hybrid approach to providing 100, that's one speeds of 100 up and 100 down, which utilizes a mix of traditional fiber optics, wireless technologies, and possibly in some cases satellite connections, especially in those areas like San Lorenzo and the mountainous where geography makes fiber only very expensive and longer to deploy. I don't have to tell you, all of you probably drive around San Lorenzo Valley, our poles up there are completely overloaded. And also too, it's not always cost effective and expensive to pull fiber to say to 5 households. So there are some emerging technologies out there that do not require a line of sight from say a tower to get internet. And so we're working with some of our regional internet carriers to kind of look at these technologies as a better way to provide more broadband, faster broadband to more people at a lower cost. And then we're also continuing to research the potential for building county open access fiber that we can lease to vendors. And what that is that would be like the backbone middle mile that will carry internet traffic out to the internet, as opposed to last mile, which is that fiber or connection that goes to your residence or your business. And we currently have one project underway that is being supported through our DPW, which is going along SoCal Avenue, which is going to be managing the light switching. So we're looking for other opportunities like that. If there's an opportunity for us to be able to lay conduit or fiber in conjunction with a project like a DPW or a planning project, we are definitely in communication with CDI, which is the department that combines DPW and planning, to see where those opportunities are. So our ongoing activities, we continue engagement with our city government, educational anchor institutions, businesses for upgrades and ongoing needs and requirements. So again, this is not a process that's going to stop with BEAD or any of the other grant processes or any of the federal. We're going to continue as the years go on and we continue to build out reliable broadband. We want to get that feedback from the residents and the businesses and be able to continue to build out to meet those requirements. We have a broadband page on our county internet site, which actually has a form on it that you can fill out. So if there is a business, residence, or anchor institution where you're concerned about your broadband, we invite you to fill that out. It gets emailed to our broadband group within the county. They will take a look at it. If there's a concern, they will try to help you with it. And we also do help out when there are issues, say, with Comcast or with AT&T or Frontier, who is now building a little bit out in the San Lorenzo Valley. So if there are issues with any of those, please don't hesitate to contact the District 5 supervisor's office or use that form on our website. We want to take measures to encourage competition for broadband services in the county. Many of our areas do have broadband, but it's only one provider. And for us, that's not the way to actually lower cost or be able to provide reliable choices for our vendors. And that is a big problem up when we did the analysis up in San Lorenzo Valley, that Comcast is the one and pretty much the one and only provider for many of the residents up there. We also want to facilitate conversations with relevant county departments, as I said before, so that we can encourage the efficient deployment of broadband technologies. We don't want a person to get hung up in, say, a permitting process. So we are having those conversations between the departments that are involved in that process to see how we can, possibly streamline. As I mentioned before, we're working very closely with the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership. We consider them one of our best partners in broadband, and they've done some amazingly fantastic work. Kudos to both David and Mara. And we want to continue to support grant applications for extending broadband in Santa Cruz County along with their support. As you probably also heard, we're working with the Climate Action project to expand broadbands in parts of the county to support the climate action process. And so what we see is that when people have reliable broadband at their house, they can do remote learning, they can work from home, they can make their house smarter from a energy perspective. So we're really working with them as part of that whole project, and we have operational objectives around broadband to basically meet the climate issues in our county. So I'm going to go over a little bit of some of the broadband state programs and federal that are supporting broadband expansion in California. So the first one is CASIF, and that's the California Advanced Services Fund. And that's managed by the CPUC, and it's funded using surcharges on revenues by carriers. And it's a recurring grant process. Cruise.io and SurfNet have both made some significant inroads in providing broadband using CASIF funding. And I'll get into some of the projects they're working on now that both were CASIF funded. The California Middle Mile Broadband Initiative, that was managed, as said before, by the CDT, California Department of Technology, and it was funded by SB 156. We had 66 miles of fiber originally, and with the latest revision of the map, we are now down to 8 miles of fiber in Santa Cruz County, which includes a very small part of 17 and a very small part of Highway 1 in Watsonville. As I mentioned before, LATA grants were also managed by the CPUC and funded by SB 156, and they were basically helped counties and other agencies to support technical assessments and engineering, and they're the ones that we use to do our broadband strategic plan. The federal funding account is Last Mile Fiber Program. Again, it's a SB 156 program. It's administered by the CPUC, and each county was awarded a certain amount, and we got awarded $10.3 million, which was allocated to our county. Only two internet carriers actually went for those grants. That was SurfNet and AT&T. And as far as SurfNet did put in a FFA grant for some fiber up in the mountains, but most of, I would say, looking at the latest maps, for AT&T tends to hit more lower Felton and really doesn't get up into the valley. And then as we'll go into more detail, there's the Broadband Equity and Deployment Program, BEAD, which is authorized under the federal IIJA, and it provides high-speed internet to underserved and non-served areas. In California, this is being managed by the CPUC, and $1.86 billion has been allocated for California. So here are some current broadband projects, in San Lorenzo Valley. Cruise.io got awarded a CASIF grant, which is going to bring high-speed connectivity to large areas of San Mateo, Santa Cruz, Santa Clara, and Monterey counties, where internet service is inadequate. And it does include some fixed wireless that is going to be in San Lorenzo Valley. SurfNet had two CASA grant projects to expand coverage in SLV, and it included some of the households off of Summit Road and a stretch up to Empire Grade. And then we'll talk about the California Middle Mile in Santa Cruz County. And again, originally the Middle Mile included all of Highway 9, and the first iterations of those maps did not. And we, along with MBEP and several other groups, really fought to get Highway 9 on there, because we realized in Santa Cruz County that was where there was the most need for expanding broadband. And as was mentioned before, recent cutbacks have removed this from the project. So the county, as soon as we heard this, I did notify Bruce McPherson's office, started working with our legislative analysts in the County Office of Administration. We are working with MBEP to start providing letters of concern to all the legislatures in our area regarding this, including, Pellerin's, Laird's office. We will be reaching out to Jimmy Panetta's office as well. We really, while we have lost quite a bit, we really want to see if we at the very least can get Highway 9 back, along with a small stretch up Highway 1 towards Davenport, because those are the areas where there is the most need for reliable broadband, not only for residents and businesses, but when you start looking at emergency communications as well. We are very cognizant of the issues that everyone faced during the CZU fire. So we really want to work hard to make sure that communication within the San Lorenzo Valley down into Monte Dune is adequate and can support all the needs of those communities. So I want to touch really briefly on some cellular proposed projects in San Lorenzo Valley. Verizon is under permitting right now for a cellular site on Route 236, just a little bit up past Severinos. They're also just let us know that they're going to be doing upgrades to the Graham Hill Tower for capacity and coverage. So there's really two issues that you see within San Lorenzo Valley. There's the coverage issue. Obviously, there's areas where you're not getting any kind of cell phone coverage, but there's also capacity. And a good example of this is if you drive up to Boulder Creek on the weekend, when you have people going to Big Basin, and people are home and they're jumping on the internet and they're jumping on their phones. You see that the capacity for supporting all those on the existing cell phone tower is not enough. So we think these projects are really important to be able to start supporting more cellular capacity and coverage up in those areas. AT&T is under permitting just off of Patrick Road, and there's also one that's possibly off another area for a 125-foot tower. With a company, CTI Engineering, in Bonnie Doon or Empire Grade. It depends upon where they finally land, but this is actually a push in the right direction. The county did redo some of the code around cellular towers, so that there is the possibility of getting towers in certain areas up above the original 80-foot. And as everyone on this call knows, that's 125 feet will just get you above the redwood tree line. So these are two projects we are watching really closely from the county perspective. We do encourage people that to go to the county planning and zoning site on our county website, check out when the meetings are. And if you really want to see improved coverage, please show up those meetings and voice your concerns about the lack of cellular coverage within the valley. It's really important that the planning and zoning commissions hear your voices, because sometimes all they hear is the voices of people who don't want to see this happen. So, and again, we're really excited to see these projects going forward. So be to the challenge process. So right now, this is kind of the map of the California Broadband Equity Access and Deployment timeline. We're kind of in that 2004. So basically, initial proposal was approved by the NTIA, and now the CPUC is conducting challenges process. And we would have loved to have given everybody a more of a heads up on this, but unfortunately we heard literally the day before they released the challenge process that it was open and the maps were available for comments. So it is only 30 days. It ends next week on, and we really want to see as we can get as much crowdsourcing information from our residents to support this. So again, the FCC maps were released by the CPUC on July 7th, review and challenge. So on the county side, we are reviewing the map data against the data that we are contained in the broadband strategic plan. As Maura will get into later on, individuals can participate by submitting challenges using the CPUC provided form. Once we get these, we will review and submit them on your behalf. The only people that can actually submit challenges are local governments, tribal nations, nonprofit organizations, and internet service providers. We have actually reached out to a lot of our community-based organizations directly. Our PIO has done social media to start this crowdsourcing process, and there is a link on the county website on the front page for you to be able to click right through to the CPUC page that I believe Tammy is going to show later on, so that you can submit challenges. What I want to emphasize here is when you can't just click on something and say, I don't agree here. They want to see evidence that, and that can include speed tests, and it can include a bill that you possibly got from your provider that shows that you are getting such a speed and you're really not, or correspondence. So make sure that if you do put a challenge in for your resident businesses or community anchor institution, that you do provide that additional information. And again, we're working to review the status of anchor institutions' placements on the map. One of the things that I found out when Tammy and I were looking at is there are a couple of our anchor institutions that are not showing up as anchor institutions. So we are working on getting those corrected as well. So I just want to put some reality around this, what the funding priorities are. The CPUC is really wanting to go fiber first, but if there is evidence that fiber is too expensive or it's not viable within that area, they will consider alternative technologies. The top priority is going to be unserved areas with internet speeds less than 25.3. The second priority is underserved areas, and that's where speeds are between 25.3 and 1020. And our third priority is going to be community anchor institutions with service under 1 gigabit per second, and those are schools, libraries, hospitals, community support organizations, public safety, or some of those. So what can be challenged? Internet availability and other specifications, your speed, latency, data caps, technologies. There's a couple of really good tools out there. OOKLA, UKLA is a really good speed test. I would recommend you take like a couple of days worth of tests and then load those up. Community anchor institutions, eligibility and identification. Like I said before, we're going to be looking at the map and working to make sure those get identified, and enforceable commitments. So if Comcast says they provide it in an area, but they don't, that can be challenged. So again, as I said before, residents and business can upload files to support a challenge. We highly recommend that. You want to speed tests. Again, FCC has a speed test app, which is a mobile speed test. So if you go outside and test your connection, there is a way to actually upload that as a challenge. And then UKLA, again, which is their website is www.speedtest.net. It's fairly easy to remember. Communications from service providers on guaranteed speeds, and then screenshots from service providers on communications and letters. So switching gears a bit here, Tammy asked me to talk a little bit about our regional interoperable next-gen radio project, which we are calling RING. So the purpose of this project is to replace the existing analog public safety radio system and backbone with a modern P25 regional system to meet current and future needs for all our first responders in Santa Cruz County. The participants in this project are the county, the cities, fire districts, the police departments and cities, and also UCSC joined in on the project. We had a technical committee that spent over a year getting together all the technical specifications for a regional interoperable system. And so our RFP went out earlier this year. It is being evaluated by vendors. And so we're hoping that proposals to come back for review in early September and then award to finally happen in 2025. So what this system will do is it actually creates a single unified system for all the first responders to be able to use and communicate, as well as provide the ability for other outside law enforcement, fire, and public safety entities to be able to come in and provide mutual aid during large events. So that's the end of my presentation. And I'll be happy to take any questions at the end of everyone's presentations.
Thank you so much, Tammy. That's amazing amount of information. And we will come back to talk about the bead challenge process tonight and dive into that a little bit more. I had one quick question. You had a slide that talked about the funding priorities related to the internet speeds. How do we know currently what everyone's internet speeds are? How do we actually sort everyone into top, second, and third priorities?
So one, it's if you look at your resident or business on the map, and the challenge map, it will show you what they feel your current speeds are. This is why the actual speed testing are really important, because when you go in there and look and you see that, say, Comcast says you get, you're getting, say, 250 and you're actually you're not getting that, or you're getting far less. It's really important to note that 25.3 tends to be things like DSL. And I know that there are still residents up in the rural and mountain areas, which DSL from AT&T is the only option. Those should actually be noted on the map. And again, if you check your address and it says that you're able to get Comcast, I would call them up real quick and say, it shows on the map I'm supposed to get this. And what we're finding in some of the residents, the Comcast is coming back and saying no. So those need to be noted. But the best way to determine what your actual speed is to do the speed tests. Okay. But the funding is really they're going to use, the first round of funding is going to be hitting the non-served. Then the next round of funding will be the underserved, and then the next round of the final round of funding is going to be the community anchor institutions.
Okay.
We did have a question in the room. Should we take that now, or?
Let's see. So I've been taking some questions in chat. Is there anyone who would like to raise a hand and ask a question?
I'm saying we have somebody in the room that has a question.
Oh, in the room, in the physical room. Yes, let's go to the physical room. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cristina Barajas, and I like to represent about 100 some people that currently have no cell phone service, no internet. I lost our landlines, which were our only way to get phone service. And still we're charged by AT&T saying, let them get cable, which is, we'd have to pay very large sums to get cable because we're not on major roads. Some people. And other ones of us already have issues with cable companies, and since they are very predatory and very difficult to deal with, and especially if you can't call them, it is very difficult to straighten this out. Now, the main question all of us, the burning question all of us have is, why was 3G taken away? The only broadcast thing that goes 8 miles, why was it taken away? It worked. And we haven't had really anything that works. None of, 4G only goes less than 2 miles. 5G goes feet, not miles, a fifth of a mile at best if there's not a tree in the way. So is the whole idea that we're doing away with cell phone service and just going to a new kind of Wi-Fi via internet service? And then how we're going to are we going to have to wire every place in the mountains? How do people like me who also work in the mountains then communicate to people? When I visit my elders, how can I make sure, like if they need something from the store, that I bring them what it is that they need? So please, does anybody have an answer as to why 3G why phone service that was broadcast was ended?
So I can give a general answer to that, and then David, because you are a little more involved with the
And I have a
cellular and
second.
wireless. So it was a decision. It was an older technology that was made a decision by the carriers of AT&T and Verizon to get rid of, in a word. And so then they shifted over to 4G. David could probably give a little more insight into the reasons that business decision was made than I can. So David, I'm going to turn that question over to you, if you don't mind. But as David's walking over for the mic, I will say that I would be really interested in, and if you could give your where you're located, either to Tammy to email to us, or be able to somehow get that information to Bruce McPherson's office. We'd be really interested to see what that area is, and then what we can do as far as, looking at getting better broadband and cellular coverage in that area.
Yeah, also I did the FCC mapping thing. I mapped, and I met with T-Mobile and AT&T, and they had to admit that they were using 3G maps and passing them off as 5G maps.
Yeah, we realized that too.
And so I have a lot of experience with this app, and I did it all over the mountains. But, it was very difficult to do because there was no phone service anywhere, and you need a phone to send the data.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Tammy. So I don't know that we got an answer to the question. You mentioned that you were representing a community. Sorry about that. You mentioned that you were representing a community. Could you give us the information about which roads or area you're in?
Yeah, that would be really important.
I can do that right now. Basically, anybody west of Highway 9 up the canyons that's not on a major thoroughfare. And we've been to lots of meetings together, the AT&T meetings and various, meetings with T-Mobile and AT&T.
Thank you. So I don't represent the carriers. I'm with Monterey Bay Economic Partnership. I am their senior advisor for broadband, but I have done quite a bit of work in the wireless space. And emergency communications, for that matter. I've been doing two-way radio since, longer than I care to admit. And I was involved with the Disaster Management Initiative at Carnegie Mellon University and a variety of other things. And I was the author of the telecom chapter for the Haywired scenario at U.S. Geological Survey. So emergency comms is kind of my game. On the wireless side, I think one thing I'd clarify is that for the same amount of power, same antennas, same height, there's no functional difference at the same frequencies. There's no functional difference between 3G, 4G, and 5G. If you replace a 3G radio with a 5G radio, all else being equal, it will still perform. The problem that occurred is that when the upgrades happened, there were also that was right around the time when the storms hit and there was some damage, which is one of the reasons Tammy mentioned that there's some projects going on. There's some radios that need to be replaced, and they haven't been replaced yet. So I'm not going to speak for the carriers. I do know that those projects are ongoing. I have been talking to the carriers about helping to facilitate those, make them move forward. And I know that their intention is to heal the coverage that was left. It just happened to be that the 3G shutdown occurred around that same time because there was a planned shutdown in the industry across the United States, and it just coincided with the storms. So, well, and so, yeah, I mean, I wrote an article in the newspaper about this and but yes, a lot of people were caught off guards. So just addressing the wireless question, I would suggest that given what Tammy talked about with these projects, and Tammy made a very good point, which is that it's really important that the community be supportive of those projects so that the service can be restored. And that's something that I will take back to people when I talk to the carriers. I will mention it to them. So yeah, I understand. I think the Empire grade towers will help. So if we get them, I hope we can get those towers up high enough to serve some of the wider areas. So, and again, like I said, I'm not representing the carriers here. I just happen to be aware of this because I do talk to the wireless carriers. And that is something that I do. That's my background. I was a tower climber at one time. So yeah, I've been in the industry. Sure, I understand. I understand. So let me suggest something. You talked about collecting data and not being able to upload it. The FCC does have their speed test app, or when I was about to suggest that if you collect data and then go into town, it will upload when you go into town. Okay. All right. You might want to consider, well, that's interesting because I didn't know that. So that's a good point. Thank you. Okay. I thought that it did upload asynchronously. Okay. We need to move on. Okay. Thank you.
So I think the root cause of this is I was looking at the FCC website that showed the supposed cell coverage for the San Lorenzo Valley, and it is just laughably inaccurate. I mean, you know, according to it, we have full scale coverage all the way into Lompico and Zayante, all the way to almost the summit. And I think anybody that lives up there can tell you, you know, in the CZU fires, you know, we had all three carriers up there and, you know, zero coverage. And I realized the fire was a while back. But anyway, I think the root cause is that what the cell providers are claiming is, you know, nonsense.
And that's a great question. And that's why this challenge process is so important. In the past, the carriers have uploaded their claimed coverage using what they called Form 477. But that was their claim. And then to have it be verified. That's one of the reasons why we're in BEAD challenge, because we're challenging what the ISPs are claiming. The apps help challenge that. That's why the FCC app was created, and there's specifically a challenge function in that app. So it is critical that your residents challenge those maps. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
What happens if you're in an area, you go into an area that has no cell coverage for your provider? You know, you open the thing up and say, and it fails. I haven't never been in that spot yet, but so it can't upload the non-existent data.
So my understanding of the FCC speed test app is that it does upload once you are back in coverage. And I know the woman said that was not the case, but that may be, my understanding is that it does. There is another option that you can use, which is becoming more popular in the industry, and it's called Cell Mapper. And you can run Cell Mapper on your phone, and it will constantly test. And then once you're back in coverage, it will upload it. And you can obtain Cell Mapper from the stores, and you can run it on your phone. And it will eventually build up a crowdsourced map of actual performance. And what's great is that the industry is starting to look at Cell Mapper as definitive data. So I know situations I've had talking to the carriers about a particular location, they've said, oh, well, what does the Cell Mapper data say? So they're beginning to look at it as something that they would consider to be valid. So I'd encourage you to consider that as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Turn it back to you.
So this is David Witowski of Monterey Bay Economic Partnership. And next we're going to hear from Maura Golde, also of MBEP, and she'll tell us about this organization and what they're up to. And Maura, are you ready?
Yeah, I am. Did you want to just jump right into BEAD first or go over middle mile? We can always switch.
Let's just go through your deck, and then after that we'll be getting into some of the details.
Okay, sounds good. I do have David's, oh, maybe I don't. I do have David's in here somewhere, but I'll just go over BEAD pretty quickly, and then we can get into those middle mile updates afterwards, since we're already on the topic of BEAD. So give me one moment to share my screen. Alrighty, so thank you for the introduction. I am Maura Golde. I am the Manager of Economic Development and Digital Equity at the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, or MBEP. You just heard from David Witowski. He's our Senior Broadband Advisor. So let's get into it. So at MBEP, our mission is to improve the economic health and quality of life in the Monterey Bay region. And we focus on these three key areas shown in this little pretzel here, which are housing, workforce development, and broadband. And I lead the broadband initiative with David, and our goal is to bridge the digital divide and ensure that everyone has access to reliable, high-speed internet. In addition to our work at MBEP, we also serve as the Executive Director for the Central Coast Broadband Consortium, or CCBC. And in this role, we oversee broadband deployment and digital equity initiatives throughout the Central Coast region. This includes Santa Cruz County, Monterey County, and San Benito County. And our responsibilities include developing broadband action plans, engaging with local governments, engaging with ISPs, community organizations like Sliven, and other stakeholders to identify and address broadband needs in our areas. So we focus on securing funding through grants to support broadband infrastructure projects, provide technical assistance and expertise to guide local governments and organizations in their broadband planning and implementation efforts. And we're actively involved in outreach and advocacy and raising awareness of broadband issues and promoting policies that support digital equity and inclusion. And then, like I said earlier, I'm gonna jump back to this slide after we talk about BEAD. Okay, so I know Tammy kind of gave a little overview of this already, but I'd like to just quickly go over it again. So BEAD stands for the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, and it was created by the Investment, Infrastructure, and Jobs Act that Manny mentioned in 2021. And it allocates $42.5 billion nationwide with a focus on achieving these three core objectives, which are developing broadband action plans, building infrastructure, and supporting the adoption of new networks. And in order to achieve these objectives, the fund will be used to first construct broadband networks that ensure that unserved and underserved areas receive high-speed, reliable internet service. Second, by establishing subsidies for internet service to make it more affordable for everyone, particularly for those in low-income households. And by third, advancing the adoption of broadband by providing devices and training programs. And this helps to ensure that people not only have access to the internet, but also the necessary tools and skills to use it effectively. So how is BEAD different from other programs? Tammy touched on this a little bit as well, but I'd like to go into a little bit more about maybe the difference between their focus and funding sources. So the BEAD program, as we've discussed, is a federally funded program that aims to deploy last mile infrastructure that directly connects broadband services to end users. The last mile federal funding account and the middle mile broadband initiative were both state programs enacted under Senate Bill 156, which was also signed into law in 2021. And this initially allocated $6 billion for providing equitable access to broadband service throughout the state, and $2 billion of which was originally slated for last mile projects. Similar to BEAD, the FFA targets this kind of like challenging and costly part of broadband deployment, which is addressing the gap in the final leg of the network that connects service providers to consumers. Whereas the middle mile's purpose is to build this backbone infrastructure that connects major networks and supports multiple providers and last mile connections. And then finally, we do have the California Advanced Services Fund Infrastructure Grant Accounts, or CASF Infrastructure Grant Account, which is another state-funded program that provides grants and loans for both last and middle mile infrastructure projects in unserved and underserved areas throughout the state. The BEAD program, as we know, is still moving along and is relatively early in its development, whereas the middle mile is in its pre-installation and installation phases. FFA funding has recently begun to roll out, as Tammy mentioned, and CASF infrastructure awards for our region have been dispersed since February, with MBEPS partners like ISP partners like Cruise.io, SurfNet, and LCP Communications, with our help receiving a total of $45 million for the Central Coast region. So now where we're at and in the BEAD process is kind of far from that award and implementation phase. We're now in the BEAD challenge process phase. So to reiterate, the BEAD challenge process is a really important step in determining which locations and community anchor institutions in the state are eligible for BEAD funding. And it's designed to verify and update the service status of locations on that FCC broadband coverage map, which makes sure that funding is directed to the areas in our county that truly need it. So on July 8th, the 30-day challenge phase began, and during this period, eligible challengers, including local governments, ISPs, nonprofits, and tribal entities, they became able to submit evidence to change the service status of any location on that map. So BEAD funding will first prioritize those unserved locations, and then second, underserved locations, as Tammy mentioned. But the challenge process is a really important mechanism for refining that allocation of federal funds and making sure that the most accurate and up-to-date info can guide this statewide effort to expand internet access. And like I said, challenging and updating the map will be really important to making sure that BEAD funds will be directed to the areas that need them the most. And these are these unserved and underserved communities. So there are a few different types of challenges, but for our purposes today, I think we should really only focus on these first two. So the first type is that challengers can provide evidence that a location is unserved. And this determination can be based on factors including whether or not broadband service is available at a location, if the service meets the minimum speed requirements, if the service latency is within acceptable limits, if the location is only served by business grade services, if there are data caps, and what type of technology is used to provide a service. And this is like the kind of evidence that this is those speed tests that we've been talking about. Another type of challenge that we'll dive into a little bit later is identifying a location as a community anchor institution. And these can include schools, libraries, healthcare facilities, public safety entities, institutions of higher education, public housing organizations, and community support organizations. So only local governments, tribal nations, nonprofit organizations, and ISPs are eligible to submit and rebut challenges, but individual residents can play a really, really important role in this process. So like we mentioned, residents can upload evidence of their service status, such as speed test results or service availability reports to the consumer challenge map, which eligible challengers can then submit on their behalf. And this is kind of a more collaborative approach that makes sure that the most accurate and comprehensive data is available for the challenge process, especially since it's super unlikely that any of these eligible challengers, whether it be, Tammy submitting a challenge on behalf of Santa Cruz County or David and I at MBEP, it's really unlikely that organizations like us will be able to verify the service status of each location and address on that map. So why is the challenge process important? Lots of reasons. So for one, it allows stakeholders like us to participate in verifying the validity of the map, and community involvement really ensures that those who know their communities best, including yourselves, have a voice in the process. Another is that it prevents the misrepresentation of data regarding locations that need funding. Some data that might be incorrect or outdated can lead to resources being allocated to areas that don't need them, while those that do need support may be overlooked. Ensuring that accurate and fair broadband mapping is really important for equitable resource distribution as well. And accuracy of maps is important to plan and implement broadband projects and make sure that every community gets the connectivity they need. And lastly, the challenge process empowers communities to advocate for their needs and gives stakeholders the tools and mechanisms they need to highlight areas that are actually lacking sufficient broadband access and make sure that these state and federal programs, like any of the ones that we mentioned, can actually address these gaps effectively. So now we'll get into how our community can participate. First, and definitely the most important thing to do, and it seems like many of you here have already, is to review the FCC coverage map. There's a link right here. And this map shows the current broadband coverage as reported to the FCC. So if unchallenged, all areas that are currently listed as served, unserved, and underserved will determine where BEAD funding will go. So reviewing this map is definitely the first step in identifying areas that, for example, are currently classified as served, these gray points, when they're actually not. You can also check out the challenge portal for some more downloadable data that shows the current classification of all these locations just in a list and in an Excel file, as well as a list of all community anchor institutions. And like I said, evidence will be needed to submit a challenge. So checking out these resources is definitely needed first. The second step for individuals and community members is to visit the BEAD Consumer Challenge page. So like I said, individuals cannot register for the portal, but they can visit this consumer challenge map and they'll submit a comment. So not technically a challenge, but a comment. So if you click on the link, you'll be taken to a map that looks just like the one in the previous slide. You can click on an individual location. It'll take you to this page shown right here that says select comment type. And that's basically, what challenge you'd like to submit. And you can just fill out that form there. You also have the opportunity to describe your comment as well. So providing as much detail as you can to like describe the evidence that you're submitting would definitely be helpful. All right, So what we're trying to do today is to really encourage community participation. Like I said, individuals can provide evidence for eligible challengers, and this can include speed tests to show the actual internet speed being experienced at any given location, evidence of service availability, such as screenshots or documents showing lack of service, and any other evidence related to provider service quality. And then through the challenge portal, eligible challengers like the County of Santa Cruz or MBEP, we can review that evidence submitted by individuals and decide whether to submit a challenge based on that evidence. Again, like I said, individuals cannot register for that challenge portal or rebut those challenges directly, but they can provide super helpful supporting evidence that we can then use to submit a challenge. And given the tight application window and the complexity of this whole process, it's really unlikely that any one entity like the County of Santa Cruz or MBEP will be able to, or even want to, go through each and every single location on that map and verify their speed or availability on their own, which is really why we're encouraging this collective effort. So please spread awareness, encourage people in your communities to learn more about speed and understand its importance, and urge your community to test their internet speeds and latency. And this is just like, a recap of pretty much everything that Tammy and I have been saying about the BEAD challenge process. But your community input matters so that we can help get funding to where it's needed the most. And that's it for my portion on the BEAD, but I can stop if there are any questions so far.
Yeah, actually, Maura, I wanted to ask you something, which is, I've been trying to wrap my head around it. It's been challenging for me to understand, do individual residents have a role of challenging how their service shows up on the map, like where we live?
Yeah, absolutely. You could absolutely just use a great example is your own house. You could, with that map, you can search up your address. If you don't think that you have 25.3 or 100 by 20 megabits per second down up speed, you could go into that map, click on your address, or just type it in and then submit your evidence challenge there.
Okay, so then because I've been trying to understand if it's to what extent individuals help with that versus the CAI. So you're saying we can do that, and so what we'll do in a minute, we'll do a little exercise of looking at what that looks like. Okay, and then with respect to what are called the community, do we want to step into the community anchor institutions?
Yeah, so I don't have another slide to describe those, but one of the eligible entities for BEAD funding are going to be community anchor institutions. And like I said, those include those schools, libraries, healthcare facilities, public safety entities, institutions of higher education, public housing organizations, and community support organizations. And it's a pretty broad list. And I don't have that BEAD challenge document that I sent you earlier pulled up. But so if you, for example, know of a community anchor institution that is not on this map, you can also contest that as well in that comment section.
Okay, so let's do this.
I can stop sharing my screen, sorry.
No worries. Okay, so what I've got here is the map that is the CPUC map, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment map, register.challenge.cpuc.ca.gov. So this map, if you like zoom out, it starts and you're just looking at a million miles away in space. And in the upper right-hand corner, I see that you can type in address. I've actually typed in Mountain Community Resources on this map. So there's all these dots here. So this is where we are this evening. And if I click on this, it repeats back the address to me, shows that it is served with Xfinity. So actually, it's interesting because it happens that this is one of our community organizations that I am curious. I think that it is maybe not not part of the classification of community anchor institution as far as I know. And I wonder if that may be of interest. By my understanding is that Mountain Community Resources here does actually offer internet access, and MCR does serve folks with low income. And I think that's one of the criteria that I read about CAI.
So Tammy, if I could just comment on that. So also too, when I was looking at the CAI list for our county, one of the things that struck me, if it was say that there was an emergency that happened within the community, a fire, if this is a place that actually provides sheltering or other resources during an emergency situation, my understanding is that would be considered a community anchor institution. So that's another clarification that we saw a lot. For instance, a lot of the schools, it's interesting if you look at the CAI list that the CPUC is identified in our area, a lot of them are schools, some of them are, churches, because they're designated that during a disaster or an emergency situation, they provide sheltering in place or some other services for the residents. So that's another thing to keep in mind.
Right, multiple reasons. With respect to this, let me just dive into this a little bit. Here in the lower left corner, we see providers, Xfinity, and this location is marked as served with 1,200 megabits per second download and 35 up. But my understanding is like these might be like the most that Xfinity might provide a location if you're willing to pay for it. Like when I looked at my residents on the map, like I kind of had the same thing. Well, I'm not paying for a plan like this. So this location is marked as served. Is there a potential challenge here because the actual plan that they've bought and they're paying for doesn't get them anywhere near the 100 down 20 up?
To answer your question, I would say yes. I think so. If you're, say, submitting a consumer challenge, you would go into that map and then choose the location, and you might choose other, just because there's no, comment type on that. It just says availability, speed, latency, data cap, etc. So you might be able to base your comment or challenge based on whether it's changing that service classification as a community anchor institution, because it's not designated as that. I would also say that for a community anchor institution that also doesn't have broadband speeds that are considered served, you can also include that information as well. So I would just say, like, take screenshots of that speed test that you're running and include that in just under the same comment or challenge.
Right. So here's the consumer challenge page, and just says submit consumer challenge. If we just walk into this briefly, we see the very first thing is we're greeted by a map again. So if I type in that same address and then it matches. So here we go, and it's a similar kind of map. We're staring at our roof. So, but this is what I see as something like this, where because this location is indicated as served, not unserved, not underserved, this next button is not enabled. So this doesn't look like I could move forward with supporting this location with any evidence.
So you've clicked the location and then you're not able to click the button next below.
Oh, I
the map?
see. I see. Okay,
okay.
so the map got me. How interesting. Okay, so the address got me close, but what I didn't do, can I do that? Let me go back. This is really interesting. There, I pasted it. Come on. Trying to get it. Okay, how interesting. What I actually have to find is that little dot.
Yep.
Okay, so I
Yeah,
grab
you'll
that
have
with
to,
my
you can
mouse.
either type in the location, and if that doesn't get you close enough, yeah, you'll just have to click on the specific dot, and then
Okay.
that'll let you go
Okay, great.
through.
Sweet. Okay, so now we see what you were talking about. These are the comment types, and this is on behalf of this address. So availability, speed, latency, data cap, technology, business service, other. Can we do multiple of these by clicking on one, going through, and then coming back? Or
Yes.
do we have to choose one? We can do
Mhm.
multiple. Okay,
You can do multiple.
interesting. So if we were going to challenge based on speed, like I don't think we're getting 100 down. So I see that. And so what's going to happen? Let me just back up. So what this is going to end up doing is it's going to create some data that's going to go in this system that will capture information about this location and maybe in this case speed test data. And ostensibly to place here Mountain Community Resources, this should be Mountain Community Resources should be doing this because they can. It should be right a representative of MCR, I would imagine, their email address. They need to give their information about their provider and technology type. I mean, if I just do sort of nothing at the moment, I would, if they're going to validate, if they're going to validate email address, I might not be able to make progress. Yeah. So we won't necessarily be able to step through all of this, but this is really interesting because I want to be able for people to understand what this site looks like. But my understanding is that this evidence and documentation site is going to lead us to things like uploading speed test data and so forth. Let's see if I've got.
Yeah, exactly. So that can be something as simple as, just using an app like David and Tammy had mentioned, or just taking screenshots of those speed tests. And most speed tests have, all that kind of information that would be helpful for submitting a challenge like this. So once a community member like yourself submits that challenge, I have my challenge portal pulled up right here under the Central Coast Broadband Consortium, and I can see I have a separate consumer challenges dashboard, and from there I can see the addresses of each consumer evidence submitted, and I can see the challenge entity, the challenge type, the census block group, county, and whether it's been challenged yet. And then from there, I can, review that evidence and then decide whether or not we can submit a challenge from there.
Okay. So what we're saying is we broadly really want everyone to check their own service on this map and help determine if we agree, yes, we're being served, or we're actually being underserved. And so one of my questions about this concept of being underserved, so like if I'm maybe my Xfinity says that I can possibly get 1,200 down, but hey, I'm paying for 35 down. I still can make a challenge based on what I'm paying for, right? That's not a criteria, right? Like what I can afford is not a criteria. It's not a limiting factor, right? I can still just measure what I'm paying for today. This is it. That's what I get, and put that in there. Okay.
And Tammy, I will say that we've already accepted challenges where people have said, I am paying for this. I am supposed to be getting this. However, when we ran our tests, we were seeing that consistently over a 2-day period, we're never getting anywhere near this. And here's a copy of my bill showing what I'm paying for. And so those are really important things because yes, you know, I'm nothing to diss the carriers, but yeah, sometimes they over-report of what exactly, as we've seen with the cell phone carriers and talked about earlier this evening. Yes, they'll over-report, and so we really want to make sure that we hold them to the speeds they say they're providing, and if they're not, that these areas become eligible for BEAD funding.
Okay. So in terms of this 30-day challenge, unfortunately, we're way in the middle of this period. Like we've got about 7 days left.
Yeah.
And but what it means is that when we put our information into this and submit it, you guys will be able to see it on your dashboard that the community has. So, okay, great.
Yes.
So we're just interacting with this website. I don't have to know your email address and send you individual files. Okay.
No.
Great.
And I will say, I can't speak for Mara, but for me, I go into that, or my analyst that is working on this project with me at the county, we go in there on a daily basis, at least once or twice a day, to see challenges and get them submitted.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about the that designation of community anchor institution. And we've defined it a couple of times. But I think what I thought was interesting about those is that I think it's really valuable, first of all, that the map actually identify resources, organizations that are meaningful and valuable to us. And one of the things that you had shared with me, Tammy, was a list of the CIIs in our area that we I was struggling looking for my trying to do a screen share. That's from this map data. So this is part of it, and so I've kind of pushed into my own document to try to sort. So these are organizations starting sorted by town. So I've got Boulder Creek and Felton. I thought it was pretty interesting. I don't even see Ben Lomond, but what people can probably take away from this is we've got fire districts on here, the SLV school district, schools. Some of them are noted as storm shelters, but all the different school sites, some of the additional ones like Quail Hollow Montessori, for example, is here, Ludlow Preschool, more fire districts, all of the branch libraries. But there are some organizations that I was thinking about. For example, Mountain Community Resources, right? So we see them on their map, but they're not identified as a CII. And is that a valuable thing to identify additional organizations in our area that should be considered CAI? And how would we go about supporting that?
So I'll speak on the value. I think it's valuable because during that third round of funding, that there is going to be funding to increase the speeds. And the last I looked at the CPUC site, they are basically saying that if a CAI does not have the ability to go to 1 gig, and it's not available, that they would be available for BEAD funding. Now, granted, they're going to be the third round, so I don't know how much funding would be left at that point, but I would say it's worthwhile to identify those using the same mapping process as Mari is kind of described here, because you could go into that other and saying this is a CAI, and then we would submit that and it would get tagged. This list that you have is actually I got from the CPUC site, and yeah, it does not include everything, even when I go throughout the rest of the county. So it's really important that if there is agencies that are not on here, that they go out to the challenge map and say, hey, they look and they're not being identified as a CAI, to actually fill out the challenge process, and then we will submit those.
This is Dan. Also note that there are some curious entities like repeater sites listed as CAI.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, a lot of we noted. Yes, just as an aside, I was joking with my radio manager. It's like, hey, we can get 1 gig internet up to Mount Toro.
Yeah.
But yeah,
note there are many errors in zip codes too.
Yes, it is not. It's not a well done product from the CPUC, which is why we really want to be able to. And we're going through and we're actually checking for the law enforcement and the public safety ones, because I know that Ben Lomond Fire is not on there, and so we are going to, in the process of submitting that those should be identified as a CAI. But if there's other organizations out there, again, a bit of outreach for them to be able to go through that consumer process to identify themselves as CAI is going to be incredibly valuable.
Right, and that was one of the things I was curious about, that like looked like Ben Lomond was completely missing.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, okay, so Ben Lomond Fire's not here. We've got Boulder Creek Fire, we've got Zayante Fire and Felton Fire, but where's Ben Lomond? Other organizations that came to my mind, it maybe perhaps Valley Churches United Mission, Highlands Park Senior and Community Center, Encompass Santa Cruz. I don't know whether Boulder Creek Parks and Rec District actually qualifies as, so I think that I think we should invite us to really think about what organizations should be considered. Now, one of the key ways that we understand whether a organization is a CAI, I think, is whether how they show up on the map, on the broadband map, right? Because if they are already identified as a CAI, then they're already served. Is that correct?
No, I was, and the folks from MBEP can correct me if I'm wrong. It means that they'll be eligible for that third round of funding.
And we don't need to make a challenge in particular?
No.
Okay. Try to grab an address here. Oops.
May I ask a question real quickly?
Yeah.
You mentioned that if they're on that list of CAIs, then they're already being served, correct?
It means that they've been identified as a CAI. So this actually brings up an interesting point. If they are showing, so for instance, let's take the mountain community. If right now it's showing as being the ability from Comcast to serve 1 gig. If they were not getting a gig service, or that was not really available to them, that should probably be put in as a challenge process.
The reason I ask is because the Boulder Creek Fire Protection District had a note on it saying that it was unserved. So does that mean that they would definitely be getting?
Yeah.
Funding?
If something's identified as unserved, it shouldn't be challenged, because that is going to be considered as part of the BEAD allocation for funding.
Right, let's fly there. So that's
there it is.
This,
yeah,
13,230.
Yeah, there's your red dot.
There, clicked it. Okay, so it says it actually knows it as a community anchor institution and does say unserved. So because it's a community anchor institution, Tammy, you're saying they're already part of that third category.
Correct.
Huh, okay. So we don't need to take this and flip over here to the consumer challenge map and do all this process. Okay, that's
This is Dan again. I think that's just a mistake. I'm almost positive they are a Comcast customer.
well, see, that's interesting, right? Because that's a great point. We think that some of these places are actually they have internet. So what gives? How is it possible that on this somewhere there's a representation that they don't have any? Does that matter?
I happen to know that they do have service within the building, but just outside the building, I mean, that's right in the heart of downtown Boulder Creek. There is little to no service throughout most of downtown Boulder Creek. We have businesses that are 2 storefronts down from the fire department that can't do transactions for their customers because they don't have service.
Right. So if
So-
we go onto
yeah.
this map and we grab one and they say served, served,
Yeah.
served, 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 served. What does that mean?
I can guarantee none of those have that 1,200.
Mhm, mhm.
And that's why, Karen, it's really important in the next day or so to start reaching out to those businesses and to have them submit challenges.
Absolutely. I'm already working on a newsletter as we're doing this meeting.
And then also too, because I've heard a lot from your businesses up there, and I know that wireless coverage is a huge issue. You are the gateway to Big Basin up there, and so you do get a lot of individuals that come through from other areas. I would have them run the FCC testing with their phones too, because it's what it's going to show, and have them do it on a Friday or Saturday, because that's when you really start losing capacity up there. So that would be something I would definitely encourage people to go outside. You have to go outside, unfortunately, with your phone and test what you're actually getting as far as cellular Wi-Fi up and down.
Right.
Yeah. So there was some discussion about the Boulder Creek Fire Protection District being unserved and actually having service. I've found a few instances of this in the data. In fact, the office where my company has headquarters is shown as unserved, and yet I have fiber. So they did not create a process to challenge the other way. In other words, you can only challenge the assertion that there is service, and then you provide evidence that there's not. There's no way for you to challenge it and say, you show no service here, but there is. And maybe we don't need that, but I'm just letting you know that there's a little bit of a kind of a logic glitch in this. And then as far as the buildings that are near that fire station, and you mentioned that they are unserved, I guess the question is service available and they just haven't subscribed to it, or is it that they cannot subscribe to service? And that's going to be a question that will have to be addressed, because it may be that if they sign up, they can get it, but they haven't done so. I'm not sure. I don't know these areas. So, but again, this is what this is all about, is getting the ground truth from locals, and they know their environment better than anybody else. So they're the ones that have to provide the reality so that the map can be adjusted.
We have a question from someone online to you, David. Why can't the testing and service levels be done remote with the ISPs and repeaters, giving actual data, right? Why are we dealing with this sort of theoretical Xfinity 1200 down? Like, why is this theoretical and not actual?
That's a really good question, and I wouldn't want to speak for the ISPs, but knowing the system how I do, my guess is that this is based upon their theoretical performance at that particular location. But if they don't actually have tested data through a gateway like a DOCSIS cable gateway or an AT&T fiber or DSL gateway, they have no way of testing it. And so they're going to say, well, we think our wires can do this well in this area. The reality of an installation and how it performs can vary in the field. I've done some work in locations where we thought we were going to get a gig and we only got 800 megs. Why did it not perform at that level? Well, it had to do with the distance away from the equipment, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So there are some realities that we have to face in this, but theoretically, these should be servable. There's also a question of like, when do you run this test? If you run a Comcast speed test at 2 o'clock in the morning, when no one is using the network, you're going to get a really good number. If you run it at 6 o'clock in the evening on a Friday when everyone's home and they're all binging Netflix in front of the TV, eating their dinner, the number is going to be very different. And that's because the system itself is being loaded down. That's why Tammy recommended that you run the FCC mobile speed tests on Friday, because that's when everyone's using their phones, when they're driving home. That's when the system, the cellular system, is being heavily loaded. So this sort of these things I'm mentioning here illustrate why speed testing is actually really challenging, because you have to ask the question, well, okay, you ran a speed test, but what were the circumstances in which you ran that test? What time of the day? Who else was on the network? If you're running a test over Wi-Fi in your home, is your Wi-Fi slow? Maybe you have an old Wi-Fi access point. So there's a lot of things that, yeah, I agree.
Okay, so you said that explains why we don't necessarily have accurate data here with respect to what's on the map. But in terms of like if we're going to do our own tests and we're going to challenge speed on these, then it is whatever it is. It is the plan we fought. It happens to be the day, right? Because when we capture the speed test data, we actually will also have to understand what the day and the time was for that, and we're going to have the results part of the speed test data that we get to upload. So what we will be able to upload is the reality of what we are actually being served.
Yeah, some access points and some home internet equipment actually does run continuous speed test, and that does get uploaded to a database. So there is some equipment that does that automatically. I would argue the carriers the ISPs probably know very well how your gateway is performing if you have service. And these numbers that they're showing here are theoretical as opposed to what's actually happening at your address.
Yeah. So I do want, because I see some of Dave's chat. So one of the things I do want to mention is obviously the county cannot verify, as we've said before, every single address, but we are kind of doing comparison of larger areas or subsets that we found during the broadband plan that we developed and comparing it to this map. So we have the ability to go out there and say, okay, at the county level, up in San Lorenzo Valley, Comcast is saying this. But when we actually did our analysis based on the data that we collected, our findings was this, and we will be challenging those. There's actually a process where we can loop areas and say, okay, this carrier data is wrong, and we are going through that process and looking at comparing the maps.
Yeah. So understandably, I think it's a little bit upsetting to the community to be hearing about this, and we are at the basically the end of this challenge period. So does anyone have any comments about how we got here?
Tammy, this is Liz. I'm coming back to a very basic question. We're all here with our hair on fire over the timeline that we've been given. Is there any possibility we can get this timeline changed? Extended even 2 weeks would be helpful, given that it appears that our community just found out about this. And in terms of the public general, is there any chance of getting the deadline moved?
I might be able to just quickly answer this question. So the BEAD program is like we said, a federally funded program that is being administered by the California Public Utilities Commission. We understand the frustration of kind of having this tight window. We knew that the challenge process was going to happen at some point, but not when. So that was kind of sprung up on us as well. What we've been trying to do is to engage our community members before and during this process to get out as much as we could. Unfortunately, we just got here, you know, a week out, but this is the best that we can do at this point. There is no chance for an extension on this. This is just a 30-day window, and the entire challenge process will be up to 120 days, including a challenge phase, a rebuttal period, and then review by the CPUC and then the NTIA. But because this is a federally administered program, there's no chance of extension.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, so it's I think what we really just need to do is do what we can to promote this information out. I know that this evening that representatives of Valley Women's are attending this call, and like the Boulder Creek Business Association, as we know, and it's up to us. And again, I feel the same way. And literally, I didn't even know as organizing this meeting that there was that we were coming up on this 30-day challenge until we already had this meeting scheduled. And I thought that at the very least, we at least need to know now and see what we can possibly do to help out to that. And I guess when I've been trying to understand this whole process, particularly for how to support our Valley businesses and organizations to help them understand what the issues are and how to, for example, run a speed test with them. It may take that someone knowledgeable about doing that to partner and offer that service, like, hey, there's this challenge process happening, and we can help collect some data to help represent accurately your location on the map. And then secondly, whether in fact some of these organizations could be considered CAIs as an additional challenge. And we are very close to short of time, but one of the things that I've done is I've put together a volunteer intake form. The little, well, it's going to be interesting because even with a bunch of people as volunteers, this is really just the most grassroots as you could possibly imagine, how to get out there and match up with organizations. But I'm going to, let me share that.
So Tammy, while you're sharing that, I also want to mention that this is a big concern as well to our local ISPs. I'm not talking about the Comcast or AT&Ts. I'm talking about the smaller ones that are seeking to provide, you know, alternatives and also be able to provide service in areas that they have not, that they feel that they can do the most for the communities. So they will be submitting challenges as well. So it's not just the community, the county, the CBOs, as well as residents. It's also those ISPs, because they're obviously interested in expanding business up in the Valley, which has been extremely difficult, which is the other reason why we are fighting so hard for an open access middle mile to be restored to Highway 9, because it's going to be able to provide more providers up there, as well as increased broadband. So that's another, and I know I've talked to several of those other ISPs, and they are looking at those maps, especially in the San Lorenzo Valley, very carefully to make sure that they can challenge as well.
Okay, so this is a form, and this is Fliven. I've made this form, and this is just an intake form for people who are willing to act as volunteers in our community. Once you send me this data, then I'm actually have some responsibility to connect you. There may be faster ways to do this. Again, so I put this link in the chat of the meeting. I mean, so I would suggest branching out into your neighborhoods, into your email lists, stop in the, like, find out in your towns what is, who's there and how we can help. I know that Karen Edwards in Boulder Creek is going to be doing outreach within the Boulder Creek area. So we do need support in our towns, and at this point, it's absolutely kind of a grassroots effort, but I will take in names and try to get people connected into the communities the best we can, or we may need to just do it together. And likely the first thing we'll do, if I've got enough folks, is to call another meeting and try to put some heads together about how to do some light self-organizing and try to get out and get this done. And that is where we are. Mar, did we want to come back and talk any additionally about the middle mile and that particular decision? Did you have some additional information on that?
Yeah, I just had a slide that just shows the map, and then David could speak really briefly on that if you still have time.
I think we have a few minutes.
Okay, let me pull that up very quickly. Let me share my screen.
Yes. So I don't need to belabor this because Tammy showed this map and we're all aware. I'm not sure more if you could pan down to the right. This slide's a little zoomed in. I'm not sure exactly why. If there's a way to kind of move it down so that we can see the full map. But I mean, the relevant area was showing Highway 9, and that's really the issue. So what happened is, as was mentioned earlier, the Central Coast Broadband Consortium, which is run out of Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, fought hard to get the Highway 9 into the middle mile program. And it was quite an accomplishment that we were able to do so. And then we found out that it was removed, and so MBEP immediately jumped on this. We wrote letters to the California Department of Technology, copy to every elected official that we felt was relevant, copy to CPUC, and we are trying, and Congressman Panetta's office and Manny was here. They are fighting this hard, and we will see how that goes. The challenge I think we face, and I just want to be realistic here, everybody in the state, shall we say, took a haircut on middle mile, and we took quite a buzz cut on this one. And now the question is if they put a mile of fiber back into our county, they have to take a mile of fiber away from somewhere else who already took a haircut. So why did we lose 56 of our miles is a question. 58 of our miles is really the question. And why wasn't Highway 9 prioritized given the population density and the fact that it's an area that has traditionally, historically struggled with broadband? These are all things that we wrote in our letter to the California Department of Technology. And I don't think the state CAI will be sending me a Christmas card this year, given how we worded that letter. But that being said, it had to be sent and we did it. So we will see we will see how this goes. And I can't promise anything, but we're trying, and we're doing what we can to support you folks. And we immediately recognized that this was a very serious situation, and we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, thank you for that, Karen. If you're still on, I don't know if you want to comment on the whole strategy on this moving forward.
Hi, yeah, I am still here. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm working on a newsletter as we're talking here to our network, basically a request for action, just to submit the data from their residences, from their businesses, so that it can support the challenge. I think from the community perspective, that's the easiest and quickest and best way that they can help. But I do know that it is vital that the Highway 9 corridor be covered again, because there, as has been spoken to tonight, there are places with zero access. There are places with insufficient access, and for safety reasons, business reasons, education reasons, it's got to be covered.
Right. So as I understand, Manuel spoke, and unfortunately Manuel has already left for this evening, but when he spoke, he mentioned briefly that the strategy of turning to our state representatives to look for other, first to respond to the situation, and to look for other ways of finding funding for this. I guess maybe my question goes back to maybe Tammy. Um, so there's still, or maybe, there's still going to be the possibility of finding additional replacement fundings, and just maybe be at a different time frame than we expect.
Tammy, or are you simply making a statement?
Oh, I guess I'm asking a question.
And who are you asking the question to?
Oh, so it could be to, let's say maybe to Tammy, or maybe even to David.
So I can kind of answer there. There is the CASAS funding, and that is something that happens on a yearly basis. We've been Santa Cruz County has actually been one of the more successful counties in getting CASAS funding to increase broadband. And that is an area we will continue to work and support, and along with MBEP and the CCBC, to support the expansion of that. And so we were very happy to see Cruise.io and SurfNet both getting funding to expand broadband in San Lorenzo Valley through CASIF. So that is one that is actually, we feel, and that's not attached to SB 156 either. So hopefully that funding will remain, and that has been one of our more successful ways to be able to expand broadband. And like I said before, it's another reason why I really want to see that middle mile, because that's going to enable the eventual more use of CASIF up in the valley. And I'll turn over to David for additional comment.
Sorry, I think we need to get you the microphone.
So that's fine. I have the microphone. I was muted. The hope is that we can replace this with something else. Also, the hope is that if for whatever reason we can't get this done through middle mile, at least we've sowed some seeds of future compensation for the trouble. And I don't know what form that takes, but the hope is that we shall we say, shame the state into doing something for us down the road, right? But that being said, right, we don't know right now, so we're just letting the political sausage machine do its thing, and we will see what comes out of that process.
Thank you. There's one more comment that's on the in the chat, which is about the AT&T carrier of last resort situation. Does anyone able to speak, just summarize what happened with that? Because I understand that there was a pretty significant shift.
So
AT&T didn't want to be the carrier of last resort.
No.
What happened?
Yeah, so AT&T has been trying to move away from analog because some of the infrastructure is almost 100 years old, and they've had that equipment. The company that makes that equipment went out of business stopped making it, I should say, in 2003. So we're 21 years away from the end of life of that product. We know that we need to make a transition as a state, but the challenge is how do we do that while not leaving people behind? There was a CPUC proceeding in which AT&T requested targeted relief from their obligations that would have been focused primarily in urban areas, suburban areas that have other technologies. But unfortunately, it raised a lot of hackles in mountain communities that thought that they were going to be left behind. And then, so that CPUC proceeding was ruled by ALJ Glagola It was dismissed. The application was dismissed with prejudice, meaning that they can't go back and apply again for another year. There was then a bill which was run out of McKinner's office in Los Angeles, in which they tried to do basically this at the legislative level. That bill was pulled, so McKinner is no longer running that bill. So right now, there is no concerted effort to move analog telephones in any direction other than where they are. But that being said, we know that we have to make a transition because the analog equipment is not going to last forever. And a transition will either happen deliberately or it will happen to us. We need to be thinking about the question of how do we move forward as a state. And that's something that I've actually been working on with people like Mark Gillarducci from Cal OES Governor's Office, or formerly Governor's Office. And we're trying to figure out right now, how do we get the state to put together a plan that moves the phone network in the right direction. But that's not related to the broadband that we're here to talk about tonight. So, but just a quick update, because I have been pretty involved in that whole process.
Right. Okay. So for now, the copper stays, and AT&T is still on the hook. And
Well, yeah, I mean, let's be fair. The copper stays where it still is working. If the copper fails, it's unlikely to be replaced. So if a line goes down because of damage, I mean, I know some communities in Southern California that lost their copper 10 years ago, and they haven't gotten it back. And they just rely on their cell phones now because that's what they have. So it's unfortunately, I think the materials to do this are harder to find. The equipment to run the switches, again, has not been produced for 21 years. I mean, I know people who maintain these networks. I worked in telecom some years ago, central offices. I mean, to maintain that equipment, they're literally buying parts off of eBay to keep those central offices running. And I'm not joking. And eventually those parts will go away. So we need to start thinking today, because the transition is going to take 20 years. And if we don't start now, it'll always be 20 years in the future. That's just my feeling. So.
Thanks for that comment.
Yeah.
All right. Actually, so with that, I'm going to actually wrap this up for us all this evening.
We'll talk
and I really appreciate our guests who have been here, who have been so informative, and really appreciate the situation that we are in. And one of the questions was about, can we have more social media posts that we can help broadcast this information? So it looks like county will be making some of those, and we'll do our best to help promote those and move those forward, put some links on the Sullivan website, and broadcast out for those who've attended the meeting as well. So we hope to do our very best. I know we have very few days, and we really appreciate everyone leaning in and trying to get this done. And again, thank you again so much for all of our guests this evening.